Hello. I could eat about 1.5 million of these.
Well, nobody's perfect.
Welcome to the It's a Drama podcast.
Daddy, I love him.
My mother thanks you.
If you can't say something nice.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Hello and welcome to the It's a Drama podcast. I'm Liz, and today I'm super excited to once again welcome back Tara Hulbert from Kiwiamericans. I had a chat with Tara a couple of weeks ago. She is an American lady that emigrated from America to New Zealand with her 4 kids. And we had a fantastic chat about her life in New Zealand and how she's, the differences. If you haven't heard that episode, just jump back in and listen to that. But today we were talking about the education system in New Zealand. Tara is, like I say, she's got 4 kids that have all been through the system in New Zealand and in America too, ranging from ages 18 to right down to a little child, I think a 2-year-old. And yeah, we just talk about the differences between the US education system and how it compares to New Zealand. I just have to say a little disclaimer here. We had some trouble with the sound. We were both on Zoom and there was a little bit of funniness going on there. But Brian spent absolutely ages actually doing whatever he could and working his magic, and he did his best to make it sound as good as possible, as best it could be. But please bear with us if there are a couple of like hissy sounds, and it doesn't last long. It literally just lasts a few seconds, but just bear that in mind. I'm pretty new at this as well, and like I say, it's only the second time I've done a Zoom call, but I think you're gonna love the show. So let's jump in and talk to Tara. Welcome back, Tara, the American, my famous American guest. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
I just had to get you back. When you said that you were into education, I just thought, no, we've got to chat more about the education system in New Zealand. I know you've got 4 kids. I know that you're in the education system, and I am not letting you go, Tara. You're not going until you tell me all about it. So, can you just, well, first of all, stop getting excited. Let's calm down. Have a sip of chamomile tea. Right. Okay. First of all, tell me the ages of your kids. How many kids you've got and the ages of your kids?
Sure. I have 4 kids. Right now they are 9, 12, 16, and 18.
9,
So,
12,
but when we first moved here, they were 2, 5, 9, and 11. So,
okay. And if you didn't hear our previous podcast episode on Tara moving from America to New Zealand, then go hop over and listen to that, and you can hear all Tara's backstory. It's a fantastic story, and she's a bit of a crazy lady actually that likes to go around America in a camper van with her children, but there you go. But yes, but you're also a very grown-up proper person who knows about education. So can you tell me how do you know about education? Tell me, just go, tell me.
Sure. So I've been in New Zealand for going on 5 years total. We were 2 years here, 2 years back in the States, and then now we've been here for almost 3 years. And so I've been through primary, intermediate, high school age, college age, and then now my first is going to university. I also teach at the university level, so I'm familiar with how things work here, which is very different. And so I'm happy to talk about the differences between the education system in the US compared to New Zealand.
Great, fantastic. So before we jump in and compare those differences, can you just tell me, because I'm a nosy Parker, but can you just tell me when you brought your kids over from America? So they obviously they went to school in America, is that right?
Yes.
Is it like just a normal school, like regular state school in America?
So we are from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and my kids went to a small private Christian classical education. That's what they were in.
Right. Yeah.
And so it was quite rigorous. It was hard. We just lived in a city where I think that the public schools are fine, but we were just really really enjoyed the school that we went to. And then as they move on to like high school age, it's just more dangerous in the schools in the U.S., to be honest, when you're getting into the high school. And the school that my kids went to was really great, but it was like really small, but just education quality though was
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
So
And when you say private, let me just get that right. Private as in you're paying for it.
you're paying for it, yeah.
But yeah,
So
okay.
yeah, and it wasn't overly expensive, but it gets up there times four.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's just in the city that we're in particular, private school was more necessary, but plenty of towns around Wisconsin would be fine, going to public school, which would be good. But I grew up in public school. I'm familiar with public school. I teach at universities all over Wisconsin. So I'm just familiar with, how they run education.
yeah.
How it's taught. I have lots of friends that are teachers, and I actually worked in my kids' school also when I went back for 2 years. And so just have a lot of input on policy and the way they do things and how they educate compared to here.
Okay. So your 4 kids are, I know your little boy was only, or was it your little girl was only 2 when you came over, was it? Or?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was a boy, and
boy,
he turned 2 when we got here. So he was really 1 on the plane.
Oh, that's a big move with a 1-year-old. 4 kids anyway, big move, but with a 1-year-old, I bet that was tough.
I know. Well, you hinted that I was a little crazy, so there's that.
You like a challenge, don't you?
I do. I'm motivated by challenge. It's true. But it was hard.
When you came to New Zealand then with your 4 kids, and you moved to Wellington, was that right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. And tell me what happened from there. What schools did they go to?
Good question. So when they came over, we knew that we were going to be here for 2 years. I didn't know what I was going to do about school. I had homeschooled my 2 oldest off and on for various reasons, and I was okay with doing that. But I also wanted them to have, an experience of going to school in New Zealand, because we were only here for 2 years, and there's part of that. But I knew that the school that they particularly went to in the U.S., was on a certain pathway, and that when we go back, for them to be reintegrated into that school, they needed to be, at a certain level. So I was a little bit worried about that. So what happened is we came, I'm not rushing to get into school. We were kind of lax for a while, and we were learning a lot. Everybody was learning a lot as you enter in a new culture. I wasn't in a huge hurry. And then in the town that we were in, it was this cute little beachside town. I went to the public school. I met with the principal. We did the tour. Wasn't my favorite, so I wasn't going to send some of my kids there. And then because the education here is, you'll notice, is definitely a little bit more free to be you and me than in the States. So when I walked through the school, my perception as just moving here from the U.S. was quite chaotic. And I just didn't know that my kids would do well in that situation. And so, but then I talked to someone, and they're like, oh, hey, why don't you try this small Catholic school down the road? And I'm like, oh, there's another school in this town? And so I went there, and I loved it there. And I sent 2 of my kids there because it was just a primary school. And it was really great because they let me be involved. I came in and taught soccer. I taught dance. I taught, whatever skill I had. And they were happy to have that. And that was really different. You can't do that. Normally in the States, you have to drop your kid outside the door, and, you can't. Anyway, but it was really nice. And so, I got to be involved in their education. So my youngest was, 2. So he got involved in the play centers here, but that's like a whole nother conversation. And then my oldest, I just homeschooled because I wasn't a huge fan of the other school.
So it's your middle 2 then that you were mainly dealing with. So hang on, let me just rewind. Why didn't you want to go to that beachside school? Because it was a bit crazy. Tell me about that. Why?
Sure. It was just, I met with the principal, and we walked through, and like every classroom we went to just looked chaotic, and like the teacher was like in the corner.
What were they doing? Which
I
is
was
like climbing
what's
the walls.
happening? Even the principal couldn't explain to me what was happening, and I was like, and it's a lot to do with leadership. Like now that I've been here longer and I understand the schools, and I have other kids in different primary schools because we live in a little bit different area this time. But me and this guy did not hit it off.
Really?
Because I couldn't okay, well, can you tell me about your curriculum? Can you tell me what it is what are their learning outcomes by the end of the year? Just because I had to go back and I just wanted to make sure that, and he was like, we just like the kids to do what they want to do and learn at the pace that they want to learn. I'm like, so I'm the type of person who, if I feel that I could do a better job, then I will. If I feel like if I can provide something that's better for my child, then whatever is in front of me. And that was okay with me because we were here to have an experience, and then I could take my daughter and go explore during the day. And it just worked. It just made sense. And because I was, kind of planning on doing that with all of them, but then, the school was really cool because it was kind of like a perfect situation because they could go to school, they could have an experience, but I could be highly involved. And so it was really nice. It was a really great 2 years. And that helped us make a lot of friends and, get to know things a little bit quicker.
Yeah, there's nothing better, is there, than having your kids in school to make friends when you first arrive in New Zealand. It's fantastic.
So true.
Yeah. So that loose, free and easy hippie headmaster over there.
Yeah.
I mean, now you've been in New Zealand for 4 years. Do you think if you went back to that school as the person you are now, having lived in New Zealand for 4 years, you would feel differently? Or was it just that you just didn't hit it off with him?
Good question. Personally, I think it was probably just the leadership, because what's interesting is I didn't send her, and then the second year we were here, we were walking through the town, and I noticed that the intermediate school, which was now her level, and that was the other thing, is she was going to be in the last year of primary, like year 6.
Oh, right.
And so that's a weird time to walk in. There's just a lot of factors, I don't want you to walk in and everybody has friends and that sort of thing, where my other two were kind of right in the middle, and they were happy to have them. They were begging for more students. It was a different attitude. And so when we walked by the school, I realized that the intermediate in this town was run by a different principal. And I said, hey, let's just walk in and just go say hi to them and just see if we can get it. And that was a whole different experience. So the second year I sent her there.
Right.
And so she did have a New Zealand, education experience and, made some friends and that was good. But because when we originally came, we also got involved in a church right away. We just, so we had, we came here for the experience. So every time we ran into a situation, should I do this? Is this going to give me an experience to understand the culture, because that's why we came here. I wanted my kids to have all these various exposures. Yeah. And so, and so she went for her last year here, and that was really good. So, but I did have to pull them out a couple months before we went back, and I taught them to catch them up so that when we went back to the States, they would be ready.
You taught them to catch them up? Why were they behind?
They would have been behind for the U.S. curriculum. Excuse me, at this private school. This
right, the private school that you
school.
Went to, yeah.
At this particular school. And I'm really close with the management there, and can you send me what they need to be able to do? Because it is different, and it's like they can't walk, you come in New Zealand, they have different expectations every year, and this one just had, different ones. And so I just had to catch them up on various things. So
I want to come back to that in a minute. Just remind me, because I want to talk about that, because that's important. But the first thing, but before I say that, I just want to say to you, you mentioned that you sent your kids to the Catholic school. Did you have to prove that you were Catholic? Because it's or can you just say, oh yeah, I'm a Catholic and I want to go to your Catholic school?
Oh, great question. Funny stories with that.
Listen up, all you people who love New Zealand and dream of moving here or even are planning to move here. 11 years ago, when we decided to emigrate to New Zealand, we'd put our papers in and everything, and then honestly, I spent months just scouring whatever I could and devouring any information on New Zealand that I could find. I was reading all the books, I was going on any websites I could find, and I was even listening to Kiwi radio just so we could get a feel of what it was like over here. And I vowed when we got over here, I'd make something for someone that just showed them what real life was really like in New Zealand. And that's what I've done for you. You are going to absolutely love this. I've created a free 5-day video guide all about moving to and living in New Zealand. Now, this guide is not your tourist guide, pretty picture-y hobbits things about New Zealand. This is nitty-gritty, what it's like to live in New Zealand, because do you know what? It's too far away. You can't come and see it for yourself. It's, you're taking a big risk. Maybe you've only been here once or twice. You want to know what it's like to live in New Zealand. And this video series is going to show you that. And best of all, it is absolutely free. Okay, you're going to love it. This is where you have to go. You can go to www.itsadrama.com/ILoveNZ. I'm going to say that again. It's www.itsadrama, so itsadrama.com/ILove, and then the 2 letters NZ. Go over there, put your email in, and I will send you 5 days of free, real life, what it's like to live in New Zealand. And I just know I'm so excited about it. You are going to love it. Let me know what you think. Okay. You mentioned that you sent your kids to the Catholic school. Did you have to prove that you were Catholic? Because it's like, or can you just say, oh yeah, I'm a Catholic and I want to come to your Catholic school?
Oh, great question. Some funny stories with that. So I went to the school and they said, well, are you Catholic? And so we're a Christian family. We've always been involved, but it would be a Protestant church technically.
Yes.
And I said, well, we are a family of faith, and this, and I'm talking to her and she's like, but are you Catholic? And I'm like, okay, I don't know. I've read the Bible. Have you? She didn't like that. And so I was like, okay, so it's really funny. I said, well, my mother grew up in the Catholic church, and they're like, oh, really? Were you happen to be baptized in the Catholic church? And I'm like, I was baptized as a baby. I got rebaptized later on as an adult, but yeah, I was. And they're like, oh, that counts.
Yeah,
all your kids are in. Okay. And I was like, what? And so I literally had to call. They called the archdiocese in the U.S. and they have a record of me, and I had to prove it that I was baptized Catholic. It was
perfect.
There we go. We got in through the loophole, ladies and gentlemen.
No hippie school for you, love. You're a Catholic.
So even though they, we aren't Catholic, I just love that they, honored God and acknowledged God in daily school, and that was important to me, and it was good. And I think to learn, the Catholic Church was the first church, and to learn, some of their processes. And my 16-year-old now goes to a Catholic high school, and so he goes to Mass and has really learned a lot about the Catholic Church. And so it's really good because it's a good history to know for sure.
Right. I know I'm veering off topic, but I just need to know this. When you said you went back to the States and you said, oh, you were worried about them being behind, because you might know, but I homeschooled my kids for 10 years, and I get a lot of questions about, but how do you know usually from Americans, but how do you know they're up to standard? And that's not something that I don't feel like New Zealand is so... I don't know if you'll agree with this, but I don't feel as if it's so massively important to them. They just seem to have the attitude, oh, well, as long as you get there, by the end of it, then it'll be fine. Whereas I get the impression that from when I speak to the Americans, that they're more like, they must be like that by the time they're 7. They must be like that by the time, they must be at that grade by the time they're 8. Or do you agree or not? Or just...
Good question.
Am I right or not?
Yeah. To a point, I would say it depends where you're going to school in the U.S. Because what's interesting about New Zealand is that the curriculum and the education system is established and run by the government. So technically, every school that you go to is learning the same curriculum. So it's nationalized education.
Right.
Whereas in the US, it's by state. And then like if you're paying for a private school, you're getting a different education. Like I paid for a classical type education that focuses on writing, that focuses on the, math and that sort of thing. But here, even if you pay for private school at the high school level, you're still getting the same education. You're just getting, it's the same curriculum. It's a different maybe culture of the school. And I mean, we can get into that when we talk about high school. But I would say that the U.S. is used to testing and working to standard. And so I wanted them to not be behind because the school that they went to was rather rigorous. That just wouldn't be the case if they went to public school. And they just focus on different things here. And they just value the child as a whole person as opposed to, can you do this? Do you know all your multiplication?
Yeah.
Can you do, and that's what they focus on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for just clarifying that. And do you know what? I didn't know that. I'm totally ignorant that I didn't know that in America all the schools they went by different states. I thought you just all had the same education, really.
Oh, no.
No.
Like I was born in New York, and when I moved to Wisconsin, I was like, I knew everything already in second grade. I'm like, what do you mean? Like I've learned all of this. Like I didn't even need to go.
So do you have like brainier states, like kids that would you say like, oh, you're from that state, you must have a really good education?
Yes.
Which is the most brainiest state in America, would you say?
Oh, that I don't know.
No.
But I know the East Coast definitely varied from the Midwest. But, at the end of the day, the goal, I guess, essentially with high school is to then get into university, right? And to ideally get a scholarship because it's so expensive there. So it's really, when you're dealing with that issue, it's not as much about where you go, but it's about having the grades and having the ACT score. And that's how you initially get enrolled or even looked at to go to certain universities.
Yeah.
And so certain schools will train you better in order to do better on the test. So you're being trained to do good on the test. You're not getting trained as like a whole person and like necessarily what you're interested in.
No, that's a good point.
So that's a different, it's a different mindset. So it is very different. And, you hear things, but, it's hard for me to say because I hear that Florida doesn't have very good schools for kids, but I haven't experienced it. So I can't say for sure. You know what I mean? Yeah. But, so you
Whereas
do hear that. But
and like you say, in New Zealand, it's just standard across the board. Whichever school you go to, you're going to get the same education, is what you're saying. It varies how they deliver that curriculum, but it's the same
curriculum is the same.
Yeah.
The learning outcomes that everybody works towards is the same. But what you'll note, and the best way that someone explained it to me was this. I'm like, so why would I pay for a private school here? Because I do pay for a couple of private schools for my older ones, when I'm getting the same education at the public school. And the way that they explained it to me was this, was what happens is like if you go into a school, like say a public school, and you're just going to have a variety of levels. Some people in your year 11 class may not be able to read, right? And you have some people in your class that are really, really bright, right? And so the curriculum for year 11 is you're getting through a certain amount. So maybe in that school, in that culture where like the classrooms are distracting or, you're having to bring up a lot of learners, you're only getting through half of the curriculum and not the whole curriculum for year 11. So then if you pay for like a private school, you're more likely to then get through the whole year 11 curriculum, which then will help them on their external exams, which then help them get into university. So that's how...
Yep.
That's the difference. So yes, you can go to different. So basically you're deciding on a school in New Zealand on the culture of the school. So some schools are good with dance and some are with music and some are big into sports and some are big into science. And so, and then you go onto the campus and you get a different feel for it. And so that's what you're deciding. The education is the same.
Right. Yes, I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah, the curriculum's the same. It's just how they teach it and their values and things like that.
Right.
Yeah. Look, I know we've done. I could talk to you forever about this, but I know we're on a time limit, so I'm going to try and keep it tight. But before we go on, I know you've done like some differences between the US and in New Zealand. But can I just ask you this one last question?
Sure.
In the UK, there's something called catchment areas where you have to live in a certain area if you want your child to go to a certain school. So, you know, like you get, I came from Bath and in Somerset, and, you know, if you wanted your child to go to this school, you had to live in that area. And then because the school was really good, the houses were really expensive. Is that the same because I don't know this, because obviously I homeschooled. Is that the same in Wellington, or do you know if that's the same in New Zealand?
Yes, you do have to, yeah, you so whatever region you live in is where your local school is. And then you can apply for out of region, like they'll have a couple spots or whatever, how many they have for that school for your kid to go to if you don't live in that area, because everything is really not that far.
No.
You know, like we're out of region for the city of Wellington schools, but if I wanted my kid to go there, I could apply as a non-resident.
Yep.
Application, and you know there's just limited spots for that, so there's options, but no, you definitely, they try to push you into like the area that you're in, so because you'll automatically get into that. So but then if you start at a school, like let's say you start at a school and you're a resident of the area and then you move, you can still go to that school,
right?
Because
Okay.
you're already established there.
Yeah.
They don't say too bad.
Yeah,
That
was I found that to be the experience in England as well. They did the same thing. We moved and they were like, they didn't kick the kids out of the school or anything. That we just stayed there.
No, of course.
Okay, so what would you say were your five differences between the education system here in New Zealand compared to the US?
Oh, okay, great question. Okay, so I kind of hit on it earlier. The first one I would say is the lack of testing for everything. The U.S. is all about let's test them, and if they do, it's all about the scores. I think some areas are moving away from that, and it's hard again to talk about the U.S. as a whole because it's very different by state and area. But in general, like testing is a big thing. The teachers are teaching for the test. So I remember when I was learning in high school, it was like, you're just learning for the test, and then you practice for the test, and then you take a practice test, and then you take the test, like that's what you spend all of your time doing. And here in New Zealand, it's, when you get into the later years of high school is when the exams start. But really up until that point, there's not a lot. There's testing. There's like where they, test you on your knowledge of something, but it's not the same. It's not like, for me, I go to a parent teacher and I'm like, so did they get any grades or marks? And they're like, oh yeah, we only they're not getting a lot of grades all the time. They're not, I'm like, how are they doing? Like, can you tell me quantitatively? And they can't, because they're looking at the student as a whole person.
And do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
Good question. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that where I live is testament to that, right?
Yeah.
That I think that the school system overall is not better or worse here. And the school system in the U.S. is not better or worse. It's just different.
Different, yeah.
And at the end of the day, as a university lecturer, I can tell you that it's not about what you know. It's not like we all have to sit here and memorize everything. It's about learning how to learn, and it's learning about where to get information, and then learning how to apply that information. And to be able to critically think about things. And so it's like if you can learn that, however you learn that. So the way that the U.S. education is set up, it works for some people, but it really doesn't work for a lot of people. People don't learn that way. People don't just sit in desks all day and are very, like that. And so my kids always functioned fine in the school that they were in, And so then when we came here, and it was just a lot more learning through play and a lot more hands-on and getting, and I'm like, they're happy to make messes all day long.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow. And, getting outside a lot more and they just value different things, know? And so they do gardening and they do, I'm like, oh, we're doing gardening in school.
Do they not do that in the US?
No. No, not where I'm from anyway. So, but yeah, just a lot of different things that they're learning. So the testing is a big one. The second one, I'm just going to talk about, the second one would be kind of what I've kind of hit on, is that they're teaching you different things. And so in school, as a primary age, as an intermediate age student, so that would be up until 12 years old, is in the curriculum, they have built-in drama. They have built-in sports. Every child learns every sport, or the sports that are common in New Zealand. Everybody learns swimming.
Yeah,
Everybody,
yeah.
And
That's weird to get your head around, isn't it?
it's weird. And and it's so great, and this is why, is because what I think that, now that I have older kids, or, it's great for a child to explore all of these things. It's so easy for them to say, I don't know, I don't want to do that, and it's because they've never done it. And so requiring it in the curriculum and having them test it out, and maybe you like drama, but you're just not willing to go on stage. And I really liked that. And I really liked that as a parent, I don't have to do all of these extra things as an extracurricular activity. So this is why American parents are so busy. Like, you're sending them to school, and then you got to teach them to swim outside of school. You got to give them this exposure to sport. You got to, and then you're running around every night.
Yeah,
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And so
That's
to
a
have that just
fantastic
built in was amazing.
Yeah.
And they would and then going into my third point, they don't really have you do homework. And it was like, what? Like, my kids, even at kindergarten, were having a half hour of homework. By high school age, it was 3 hours. Homework
3
was part of our
hours?
life. Yeah, it was part of our life. Like I said, it was rigorous.
Yeah.
It wasn't the best. But, yeah.
No wonder you needed to get in a camper van and go around America. You're exhausted.
It was exhausting. But they were learning a lot. But anyway, it was yeah. So once actually I went and taught in that school, when I went back the second time, I realized that what the high school students at this particular school were learning was college level stuff. And so this is not necessary.
No.
That you put this all on them at this age. They'll get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
give them 3 hours of homework. Okay, but anyway, that's my 2 cents about that.
Yeah.
So, the no homework thing. Or homework being optional, getting things sent, they give you resources to do homework with your kid if you value that, and that was normal for us. My kids were in routine of homework, so I wasn't going to back down from that. We're going to do the homework.
Yeah.
But, they started to really understand the optional side of it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because they were doing it in the States because they had to, and it was part of you get in trouble, or, that sort of thing. Whereas here they're realizing, nobody cares.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is really great. I don't have to, because they would actually say to me, we want you to be home together as a family at night and not worry about homework and running around at sports.
Look, how important is that? That's amazing, isn't it?
I'm like, where am I?
Yeah.
Where am I?
Yeah.
You hear about that kind of education system in Finland and over in the Scandinavian countries, but it's like that here as well.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, okay. And so, did they probably learn as much as they were forced to learn in the school they were in? No, I don't think so. But, learning stuff that sticks was probably better.
Yeah.
Because it was hands-on and doing it. They did a lot of science in primary school, and my kids loved it.
Yeah.
And getting their hands dirty and doing stuff. And then because you're more exploratory, you're more open to figuring out what it is that you actually like. And, But as a negative point, though, I would say, some of my kids were pretty bright. My youngest now, I went to the parent teacher, and she's like, well, the class is we're learning hundreds, and he's in the millions. And so I'm like, okay. So, it's just, there is a little bit of feeling okay, is he being challenged enough, that sort of thing. And so I just have these conversations with the teachers every year. In the beginning of the year, I say that, and they have, records of where he's coming from. So, he's been doing the spelling words, he's way ahead in the spelling words. That's the point. And so it's but as long as the teacher is willing to give him work and teach him at his level, then I'm fine with it. You just, because there's so much that you learn socially.
Yes,
and, just that sort of thing. That's just as important in growing up and communicating. And so,
it's just
so
that
as long as
well-roundedness, isn't it? It's just, just like you say,
Yes.
it's not just focus on one, it's giving you taking everything into consideration. And I love that we don't get the homework as well.
Yeah, my first report card was oh, and they're talking about how well they contribute in class, and how will they work with others, and if they have friends, and how they did in swimming. They got a mark for how they did in swimming, and I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing trends with your kids, and I think that the teachers, I mean, my experience is probably not everywhere. The teachers are pretty open, and I just say, and you as a parent can work with them more at home if you want. Or
exactly, that's what I was just thinking. When you said about your son being maths, there's loads of stuff that you could do out of school, I suppose, that would challenge him mathematically, isn't it?
Right, because he's in school from like 9 until 3, and if he's spending an extra hour doing something, because I really, even over lockdown, I should have done more of this, but I should have taken some time to just teach American history, teach some things that are just probably not going to be taught in the schools here, that would be good for them to know from their own culture and that sort of thing, and just any other things the American curriculum is somewhat standardized in that that you learn all your states in third grade, and all the capitals, and you learn you learn your multiplication tables in third grade, and you learn the cursive in fourth grade. So there's a little bit of that, and so when you're seeing that they're not learning that, then you can just, if that's important to you, you can do that.
Yeah, that was a real shock to me, because Sonny had been in school for 4 years in the UK, and his handwriting, he'd been right from the start. They teach them joined up handwriting, cursive, and we got over here and they told him to stop, and they were like, we don't teach cursive in schools. You have to print. And I remember thinking, oh no, it's just coming to terms with that they don't do it. But the other thing he said to me as well, that I'll never forget this, we were walking along, he'd been in school for about 2 weeks, and he said, it's really weird, Mummy. And I said, why? And he said, they just keep talking. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, all the class, they just talk to the teacher, and the teacher talks back to them. And I was like, why is that weird? But thinking about it, the school he came from, the children sat quietly, the teacher talked, and you just got on with your work. In New Zealand, this is my experience with Sonny in primary school, it was just very much class discussion right from the start. They're encouraged to stand up, say what they think, get everyone involved. And I just absolutely loved that. I mean, it was scary for him, but I loved it. I loved that they were doing that. I thought it was a fantastic way to teach. Oh, girl,
that is a good point. That is exactly true. Yes, mine, we're not used to that. Everybody's just talking, and they're like, it's so loud in the class, and they're used to just listening. Agreed. And that's important as well to a point. But so it's funny because the feedback I always get, your kids are, really good listeners, and they actually pay attention, because they're really trained to pay attention to the teacher and to do what they say. Yes. And, they're like, can we have you have other kids? Can we have them? Because it's just, it's helpful for the teacher in a class of 30 that somebody's listening to them.
Okay, go on then. What's your next point?
Okay, and the last one, let me see, was, no stress. Oh. So if you were late for school, they would get a detention. If they were, there was just that feeling, and that was true for me too with work and stuff. Even if I got stuck in traffic, you could literally call in and say, I'm stuck in traffic, and that would be a good enough excuse. And I was like, oh. I'm like, but my class is starting, and they're like, it's fine, I'll just have someone fill in for you. You get here when you can, no worries. I'm like, what? My whole stress level changed. My whole, and for my kids, because some of the kids would be more anxious in general, and that just, it's gone. We don't have any of that anymore, of just feeling like the rush all the time. Yeah. And
same with England too. That's what I felt like when I came over. It was just that, just that you gotta go, just that constant switched on, aren't you? And over here they do. It's like, it takes a while to get used to that. You don't have to be rushing around everywhere all the time. And I'm really glad you said that, because I was starting to think, is it just me? Because I live in Taranaki, and Taranaki is just it's known for being laid back. But to hear that you feel the same and you're from the capital, that's really reassuring. I'm not just a country bumpkin.
It's just, no, you're not. It's just New Zealand. I'm telling you, they're so flexible and reasonable, and they don't put that stress on the kids, and that's really great for some of them that struggle with anxiety. So, I really like that. I just
Yep.
like that in general. So, things aren't maybe as efficient as I'm used to them being.
No, but they
But
get there in the end, though, Tara, don't they?
They do.
They
Yeah.
get there in the end.
They're not uber inefficient.
No,
So
no.
it's not the other extreme at all. So
And do you find that the kids, because I know that you said in America there's tested and that's their aim is just to go to university. Is that the same over here? Is that the goal to go to university, or is there a little less?
That's a good question. And that's another point as to what high school or college, they call college high school here. So if I use them interchangeably, depending on who's listening to me, is college is high school here, and then university is university. So, where you go to college kind of determines that as well. So like my girls go to a school that's a private school here that's quite rigorous, and everybody's focused on going to uni, right? But then other schools that my kids have gone to, they're not. So here it's you go through year 13 here, whereas in the States it goes through the 12th grade. And so what's interesting is you can technically leave in year 12 here, but you have to finish year 13 if you want to go into university. So you have to be through level 3 of NCEA, which is a whole nother discussion, which we won't get into because that'll be boring. But
it won't be boring, but it would. Yeah, it's like you say, it's just one of those topics that would just need a whole podcast all for itself. So
It would.
Guess who's going to be calling you in a few weeks?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. Yeah, maybe we should have one on high school, because that process is very different than primary and intermediate, and then getting into university. And I don't have any kids. My daughter's going to university, but I work in the university, so I understand the different levels and how they work.
Yeah.
So.
Do you know what? I think that would be a really great thing to do, because I don't want to rush this. I don't want to say, oh yeah, university. I think that deserves, like you say, a podcast episode. Would you be willing to come back and do?
Yes, of course.
That would be fantastic. And then we could just talk about university entrance, and just the whole. Because my kids my son hasn't gone to university, and I don't think Tessa's intending to go. She's sort of maybe thinking about going to some sort of drama college or something. But it's interesting to know that, what route they take and how they get there. And so.
Yeah, there's lots of options in the U.S. And so, a podcast about just talking about, I would talk about college, high school level, and then going into university, because you really start your university at level 1, which is year 11 in college. And so that's how it's a little bit different.
Okay. Let's do that. Let's do that in a different episode. So before I let you go, because I've kept you for quite a while already, but before I let you go, just in general, what would you say that the schools, I know you said neither is better nor different, they're different, neither is better. But in your experience, having kids over in America at school and then having kids over here in school in New Zealand, which do you think is better? You've got to say, not allowed to say both.
Am I forced to answer this question? And I'm just going to give you a really honest answer about that. Is that, it kind of depends on the day how I feel about it. Because sometimes you go like, wow, are we getting anywhere in this school?
Yeah.
What have you even learned? What have we, and you got to see a lot of it when they were at home during COVID, and you're doing school from home, and, and then they have all these, they take them and they do these EOTC weeks where they go out tramping with their, and they do really cool things. And then you have those moments where I feel like, oh, are they really missing out? They used to go to this really great school in the U.S. and they're like, am I not? Was that a bad decision? It's not an easy decision.
No.
And it's for one to say it just all depends, and I think it depends on your values, your family's values, and But I can say as a person that trains people into the workforce, at the end of the day, it's not always about what you've learned, right? It's about learning how to enjoy the learning process.
Yes, I agree.
And applying that in your life. And that's what's going to make you successful. And it isn't just that you've memorized all of this to take the test. Because I can tell you, when I was in high school, I don't remember learning anything.
No.
I was learning to take the test. I take the test and I walk out and it's gone.
Yeah.
I learned how to take a test. That's what I learned how to do, right? And then it helped with university, but not completely, right? So you have to actually apply a lot of other skills. And so at the end of the day, I think that there are really great things about the New Zealand education, and it's not perfect. And there's really great things about the U.S. education, and that's not perfect either. But overall, I mean, I think you see where I live.
Yeah. That's a nice diplomatic answer. Do you know what I learned from high school? Do you know what I remember from high school? There's 2 things I remember. 8 8s are 64. Okay, don't forget that. 8 8s are 64. And listen to this. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a dans l'armoire? That means what's in the wardrobe in French.
Okay, that's hilarious.
So if there's ever 8 8 sitting in the French wardrobe, you know what? I'll be there. No, honestly, that's what I say to my kids. It's like, I really don't remember half the stuff that I learned.
Right.
No.
Because what you're worried about and what's important to you at those 16, 17, 15 is social, is learning about all, you can't, this is the other thing, is you can't learn unless you're willing to learn. So you could give me the best teacher, the best curriculum at me, and if I'm not willing to take it in, it's a two-way street, And so when I'm working with university students and they're just like, they're just clearly not ready. It's like, you're wasting your time and money at this point. Go do something else. Go try all this stuff and then come back if necessary, because you have to be open to learning it.
I agree.
It won't go in.
That's what I told my kids. It's like, even if you don't want to go to university now, go when you're 25 if you want to. Just go and do what you want and travel or work or do whatever you want. And then if you want to go to university, you can go as a mature student. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And the education system is changing.
Yeah.
Like the whole world is changing. Like education isn't just something that you learn when go to university in your 20s, or 18. It's lifelong learning. We're working on like micro credentials now in New Zealand and around the world, and it's a continuous learning. Like you could train up for a job that you do for 10 years, and then you do something else, and you go back to school and you learn that, and that's the wave of the future.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be like you shouldn't have all this pressure on students to like, let's go to university at this age and learn everything and decide exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Exactly. Yeah. So just before I let you go, then, quick question: with your children, I mean, particularly your 18-year-old, where would they prefer, here or America? Did they tell you?
Great question. Yes, she did.
And?
Basically, I begged her to take the ACT and to apply at universities in the US and in the UK. Like, why not? Like, why not apply for everything and go for it, right? And see what you get. She had no interest.
Really?
I could not get her to do anything. She was like, I'm staying here. I'm going to university here. This is where I want to go. This is what I want to do. And there has been she was adamant about it. And she's my firstborn. So, they tend to not make real strict decisions. They tend to be a little, because they're the first one, like, I don't know, is this good? And that one, she was not doing it.
Right.
I'm not going to school in America. I'm not. Okay.
Yep. Proof's in the pudding then.
There it is.
Tara, thank you so much. Now, before I let you go, you have got the most fabulous YouTube series, and you're a big YouTuber, and you've got this wonderful, wonderful episode all about New Zealand school systems that you just covered everything. Yeah, and it tells you if you're listening from America, and it tells you everything that you need to know about right from the kindergarten you go from, don't you, right up until high school. I love all your episodes, but I particularly love that one because it just told me everything there was to know about the New Zealand school system. So can you just let people know where they can find you and how they can get in contact with you?
Yes. I've just started putting some information out on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and all under the same name, Kiwiamericans. You can check it out, find out. I'm happy to help if you guys are thinking about moving overseas somewhere with your family. Got lots of tips for you. So check out those videos and reach out to me there. I'm happy to help.
Fantastic. I love that name, Kiwiamericans. That's a really good name. Real catchy as well. Tara, thank you
nice.
so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your knowledge. I've absolutely loved it. And I am definitely going to get you back again, and we're going to talk about college and university. It's a deal, hey?
Sounds good. I'd love to. Thanks,
okay.
Liz.
I'll see you soon. Bye.
All right. I'll see you.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on the podcast. We have loved having you here.
If you guys could subscribe to us on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review.
Oh yeah, that would be nice.
That would be absolutely amazing. And make sure to share the podcast with your friends.
And if you'd like to hop over to the blog, find one of the little boxes that ask you to drop your email. I will send you a newsletter every week letting you know when we've released our new podcast. That will go straight into your inbox. So it's www.itsadrama.com.
All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you next week for another podcast.
Look forward to it. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.